The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone, welcome and thanks for joining us today for our webinar. I'm Matt from Soft Solutions. I'm our Communications and Continuity Solutions Manager. On with us today we have Karl Thomson, who is StorageCraft's lead sales engineer for Asia Pacific. Today we're looking at ShadowControl and its benefits. It's a very strong solution that can sit and has very fantastic reporting that can be threshold based for events. So not just your pass-fail checks, it actually gives you proper detail and rich reporting. Carl will go through a few slides around this and we'll have a quick demo. Please note that this is being recorded and you will all be sent a link to this webinar after. Any questions, please feel free to shout out and we will answer them at the end. And with that, I'll hand you to Karl.
Cool, thanks, Matt. So yeah, just to clarify, everyone's on mute. Just use the questions field and we'll go and check that at the end and I can go back and cover anything off in more detail. And yeah, again, we will record it and it'll be up on our YouTube and emailed out to you as well. So pretty straightforward. From the team in New Zealand, we've got my colleague Andrea Martin. She's our business development manager, so she helps across all of our accounts, and then myself as a sales engineer. So any sort of technical onboarding, just sing out, I'm happy to help. So as Matt said, this webinar is focused on our StorageCraft ShadowControl today. So this is a really fantastic feature that is included for free with ShadowProtect. So it's a really key part of the solution, particularly for our managed service providers, giving them visibility across all of their customers from a central dashboard. So as mentioned, the key thing is overseeing the solution across multiple clients or sites. And, I guess traditionally we might have done this by setting up email alerts. So for example, our ShadowProtect or SPX or ImageManager softwares, we can have it send us emails to say, hey, look, a backup's failed. You might need to check it out. The problem is, if you're just expecting emails to tell you if it failed, what would happen if the email never got to you because ShadowProtect had locked up or the firewall was blocking or the email server's down? You just wouldn't know at all. So then what people started to do is they said, well, I'll get it to send me an email every day and I'll check that email. But they said, well, look, are you counting how many emails you receive and making sure there's not one that you're missing somewhere? And so suddenly you can start to pick holes on that sort of traditional approach. And then we'll talk a little bit about this more later, but then obviously people will start to leverage their RMM tools, so monitor the event log. So I'll talk a little bit about how this will really complement what you're already doing. But yeah, what ShadowControl is doing is giving us full visibility into the status of the jobs and make that administration as easy as possible for success. If you're charging your customers to do a job, we need to know that you're getting the correct visibility, and we need to make that easy. And setting up emails has its own challenges, and this is where ShadowControl comes in to really centralize that. So ShadowControl is a central monitoring and management console for ShadowProtect and ImageManager operations. It gives you complete visibility. You'll gain peace of mind knowing your backup jobs are running smoothly and that you can remedy any issues before they actually affect the customer. So what I'd like to do is take you guys through a bit of a diagram. So I've just got let's think about it from a customer and end user perspective to start with, and then we'll kind of look at it from an MSP perspective at the end. So if you had a large end user or you are an end user yourself, this is going to be where ShadowControl might fit into a single environment. So we start off with virtual environment here. I've got a physical server in this diagram as well, and you might have some sort of backup storage. And then from the virtual environment, you might have your traditional vCenter appliance, and this is where ShadowControl would sit in. It's a virtual machine. This would be the start of a single deployment. You'd start with ShadowControl as the first piece to deploying the StorageCraft solution. Again, it's a central monitoring and management console. The ShadowControl appliance is free. There's no licensing. It can be installed onto a physical server or run as a virtual machine because it's an appliance. It's based on a lockdown Linux. install, so you don't need any Microsoft licensing to run that either, which is fantastic. Now, the next step in this scenario, you could install the vCenter plugin. So we have a VMware plugin, and we also have a Microsoft plugin for Virtual Machine Manager, System Center. So these plugins, what they do is it gives us visibility into shadow control of your entire network. It allows us to see all of the VMs, and that helps facilitate a push install of the ShadowProtect software. So SPX or even the legacy ShadowProtect 5 can be deployed from ShadowControl if either using the traditional GPO-based deployment with the MSI installers or leveraging the push install from ShadowControl to achieve that, and that will work across the physical machines as well. The next step is obviously the backups. So obviously that's what ShadowProtect does, and this can be policy driven from ShadowControl. And then the final piece is obviously pushing out ImageManager. So ShadowControl again can push out and update ImageManager. And that's a real key thing as well, is not just the initial deployment, but also ongoing upgrades of the ShadowProtect and ImageManager agents. We can do all of that from ShadowControl. So that's kind of where it would fit into a single site. From an MSP perspective, this is a diagram that I would often use. Let's just see here. I'm just going to see if I can bring up the highlighter. Okay, so we've got up here, a single site, right? So there's a production servers and workstations. In this virtual environment, as we've just looked at, this is where you could run ShadowControl. Now, from an MSP perspective, you'd actually look in the offsite to run your own ShadowControl instead. So by an MSP running ShadowControl, that could be in their office, in their data center, it could be in Azure or AWS. So ShadowControl just runs as a VM. And what we have is it can deploy out, or again, leveraging your RMM, it can deploy out what's called the ShadowControl endpoint agent to each of your customers. And that just communicates over 443, so HTTPS. So the endpoint agent will sit on every customer's machines that run ShadowProtect and or ImageManager, and they report back to your single central ShadowControl. It's fully multi-tenancy, so you can separate each customer into their own organization and have separate logons and reporting based on customers. So really cool. Matt mentioned one of his favorite things is the reporting, and this is quite cool because it's multi-tenancy. We can have a report go daily, weekly, or monthly out to a customer, and it's a single email that shows all of their machines. Rather than having ShadowProtect send an email from each machine or each server, we get one from ShadowControl. It can be branded with your own company logo on it, and it can send it out to the customer, and it's very clear and concise about what they're reading. So it's kind of basically how it fits in. Let's go and take a look at some of the features of ShadowControl. So obviously the push install we talked about, can leverage that plugin into vCenter or System Center. Obviously that's only applicable for the initial deployment if it's the appliance is installed on site. So from our MSP perspective, you might leverage your RMM to deploy the ShadowControl endpoint agent, but once that's installed, ShadowControl can then push install ShadowProtect or ImageManager. So that's very easy, and again for updates as well, it makes a huge, it takes a huge strain off by being able to push out updates when we release newer versions. And it can handle activations for initial deployment as well. We've also used it for partners to transition their licensing from, perpetual to MSP or between different MSPs. It can do bulk activations and stuff like that, which is really cool. Remote monitoring, so obviously, so we know what's going on without needing to visit each individual endpoint in the organization is really important. Policy-based management of backup jobs. So I think I touched on this slightly earlier on. We introduced this feature alongside releasing SPX, and basically we can create a single backup job in ShadowControl and apply that to a whole group of machines. I could apply it to 100 servers and they'll all start backing up without ever logging into them. So policy is enabling our solution to scale into much larger environments because I don't have to log on to each machine and create an individual backup job. So that's really cool. Hypervisor integration, I mentioned we've got those plugins. Configurable alerts. So really, alerting can be overwhelming in some scenarios, right? It can create a lot of noise. So the idea is with configurable alerts is we have what's called status rules, and based on your predefined settings, and it's kind of like your SLA, you can say at which point is something really a problem that I care about. Look, if I'm backing up every 15 minutes, 24/7, that's 96 times a day. Probably don't care if a job fails every now and again. You know, the server might be busy, maybe I rebooted it, maybe I was doing something. Look, you might say, look, as long as I've got a good backup within an hour, then don't bother me with an alert. So this is really cool. And again, it helps reduce the noise that you might traditionally be getting with emails or with your RMM picking up on every single event ID, you know, regardless of the situation. So ShadowControl is really automated by leveraging this kind of SLA policy that you define, and you can have different policies based on the customer's plans that they're on with you or their monitoring requirements. And then reporting I've kind of touched on is those daily, weekly, monthly reports. We can have some customers' reports go to one of your engineers, other customers go to another engineer. We could have a monthly one that goes to the customer. You know, it's very customizable, and you can control what information is going to be in that report as well. So from the technical specifications, there's two pieces. There's a ShadowControl appliance. Again, most MSPs just have one. It runs in their office, in their data center, or in the cloud. And then the ShadowControl endpoint agent, which installs onto each customer's computer. It's just a very small, lightweight install, doesn't require a reboot. It can be silently deployed and activated using existing RMM tools as well. So it's very straightforward. In terms of an RMM, StorageCraft has traditionally had some plugins available for some of the key RMM providers. But what we're seeing is, look, you can deploy this out very easy. I'll show you where the silent install information is to deploy the endpoint agent out to your machines. You could have a script that says, look, to all my computers, if you've got ShadowProtect, SPX, or ImageManager, install the agent, and then you can use variable parameters to activate to an appropriate organization. And really what I would say is consider turning off those event log monitorings that you're doing in your RMM for the backups and ImageManager, and leverage the ShadowControl status rules. That will really automate it, and it gives you a lot more control about which point something's really a problem. And then ShadowControl has built-in ITSM notifications, and that can actually drive those breaches straight into your support ticketing, you know, logging yourself a help desk ticket to go and look at it. And at that point, you would just go and look at ShadowControl, and you might see the situation. You might be able to remedy it straight from there. Some of our partners, you know, they've got the ShadowControl dashboard up on a TV screen in their office, in real time they can see what's going on. Other people, they've already got their single pane of glass with the RMM, and they like ShadowControl to feed it back in that way. So we'll show you more about that. But in terms of the ShadowControl appliance, the requirements, really it just needs a machine that can support Ubuntu Linux. That's our latest version. It's running on version 16.04 of Ubuntu. So particularly if you're looking at a physical machine that you want to install it on, otherwise, you know, Hyper-V, VMware, or in the cloud, it's pretty straightforward. Just needs 2 gig of RAM minimum, 80 gig hard disk space. So really, you know, the RAM you can increase if you feel like you're growing. I mean, I've got customers, you know, up to, you know, a couple of hundred machines in there running on minimum, and it seems to be okay. Upwards of 1,000, you might look at, you know, maybe 4 gig of RAM. 80 gig disk, that's a little bit more tricky, obviously, to increase that down the track. So maybe look at, you know, 100 gig thin provisioned. I mean, I haven't seen anyone fill it up, but it just gives you a bit of peace of mind there. 2-core CPU and an active internet connection. So what you'll get with ShadowControl is we give you an ISO. You boot off the ISO to do the install. The ISO, as part of that install, it connects to the StorageCraft repositories and the Ubuntu repositories to get itself up to date, and it will constantly tell you, hey, there's new security patches from Ubuntu or from StorageCraft, and it installs itself, but it does need an active internet connection to do that. If you are interested in running an offline or a dark ShadowControl, just reach out to me, and I can kind of guide you through how you might achieve that. Cool. So let's just take a look at the install guide, and I'll take you through a bit of a demo of ShadowControl. So in terms of the StorageCraft website, there's a ShadowControl product page here. I have included, and I've kind of run you through this, I've included the data sheet as a handout on the webinar today, so you can go and download that. But really what I want to do is take you through to support. Now I've got the link open here, but actually what I might do is I'll show you how I got there. So I'm just going to go to storagecraft.com, click on support. This is our new support site. So I think it's just good that I show you how I navigate it because things have changed. and then I'm basically going to click on Shadow Control. And then what I'm looking for here is the user guide. So that generally pops up under trending articles as the Shadow Control user guide. There's heaps of really great information in here. So the couple of the key ones I just want to point out to you is installing the Shadow Control appliance. So that's section 2 in the user guide. This is just going to highlight all of the requirements. And obviously I highlighted a couple of them here. The memory, the CPU, the ports. So this is the ports that the endpoint talks to the appliance on. So the customer will talk outbound on 443, and that needs to be port forwarded to the Shadow Control appliance. Alternatively, it will automatically fail over to 8443. So some people use this if they're already using 443 on their IP address for the Shadow Control. So that's customizable. We recommend having 5556 available for endpoint. This is just for updates or bidirectional services. So some people that do not have this open may have difficulties with doing push installs. If you're going to leverage Shadow Control for email notifications, it requires port 25 outbound. Then obviously a web browser is how you're going to access Shadow Control. So I think that's pretty straightforward, but that's the information on where you can find that. The other one I wanted to show you was subscribing, installing an endpoint. That's what I'm looking for, number 3. So it's actually the very next section. Now in here, gives us a little bit more information further than what we'll see from the Shadow Control, which we'll look at in a minute. So what I'm actually looking at here is, let's see, there's a section here on deploying Shadow Control with a scripted setting. Now, actually, I'm not seeing it there, so I'm going to just go down to subscribing an endpoint. Actually, that's what I'm looking for, is subscribing an endpoint. Sorry, the very next section. So there's 2 parts to deploying the endpoint, is installing it, and then it's subscribing it. So that's basically activating that endpoint into Shadow Control. Now in here, we've got the Shadow Control command lines for subscribing from a command line. Now, what you'll see here is these parameters. So the key one here is -O. So once you've installed Shadow Control, here's the command here you run to subscribe the endpoint, the customer's machine, to your appliance. And using this parameter -O allows you to say, for this customer, I want it to join, the same organization name in Shadow Control. So you can use a variable with the RMM tool to say, I want you to create this organization in Shadow Control if it doesn't already exist, and join that machine to it. So you can create a single script which can be bulk deployed out to all of your customer machines very quickly, and obviously this just facilitates that multi-tenancy aspect of each organization or site for each endpoint. So I just wanted to point that out. Those are the 2 key things in the user guide that I like to refer people to. So that's basically that. The other thing is on our StorageCraft APAC YouTube channel, there's a section here that I've done, StorageCraft Solutions by Karl. And if you just scroll down, there's 2 sections here on deploying Shadow Control in Microsoft Azure or in AWS. So if you don't have virtual environment in your office or in your data center to manage all of your customers from, feel free to fire it up in the cloud, and that's the process to do that. Now, once you've installed Shadow Control, this is the dashboard. Obviously, there's a login section prior to this. The actual appliance itself, if you look on the console of the VM on the physical machine that you've installed it to, it's basically just a Linux login screen, and you don't actually have access to log into that. So it's all driven from the web page, and the dashboard gives us that single pane of glass. It's auto refreshes on by default, so you can have it up on a big screen. This is telling me I've got 8 machines that are okay. I've got 2 that have got a problem, and I've got 7 that are currently unresponsive, and those are just VMs that I've got powered off. But that might be that the customer's internet's down or they're not responding. Now I can see straight away the 2 that are critical. The problem here is that the backup job is paused for both of them. It's telling me there's 2 here right away. Without doing anything, I can see that they're paused. If I click on the 2, it'll even tell me what the machine names are. So very quick to get access. And then in the middle here, I've got the ImageManager. So I've got 1 ImageManager is good, 2 that have got a problem. Now, interestingly, these 2 are reporting folder inactivity. I know that this is a problem because these jobs are paused. So this error is actually causing this one. So, as simple as resuming these 2 backup jobs, this problem will go away because the backups start coming in again. So really cool. Obviously, if I want to dig more deeper, if I click on these two criticals, it's going to tell me what the machine names are, who the customers are that I've assigned them to, when the last backups were, and the versions of our software that's been installed. If I click on the endpoints, it'll list all of them, and I can see the little green arrows indicating that I could use the push installer to update them to a newer version. So that's really interesting. I can drill right down into a computer, get information on the status. I can pull event logs or system logs. I can see information on the machine, the versions of software and the licensing. I can even see the backup job, which I could tell it to run or stop or pause. I can see information on where it's backing up to, and then the volume. So I've got 2 volumes here, and it's telling me that they've both been backed up. So that's really cool. So yeah, get a lot of information. Obviously, everything is driven by search terms and filtering. So I can say, just show me customer in Sydney, or whichever, however you organize it, so you can quickly filter to see exactly what you're looking for, which is really fantastic. But then back on the dashboard, the final section is just ShadowControl. So obviously on each computer, I've either got ShadowProtect and or ImageManager, and so alongside that will be a ShadowControl endpoint agent, which is feeding in. Now underneath this, we get a bit of a log. This log just shows the most recent 10 errors. So I could be in a state where there's no problems for a long period of time, and it might show some errors here. That will just be dating back to the last error that happened. So, generally you might say, well, look, I'm just going to ignore these, or when there's a problem here in red, I might be able to glance down and just see, oh, that's relating to, the fact that the backup's being failed. I mean, these machines are powered off. So, they previously failed. They're offline now. This one here is telling me I've got inactivity warnings where backups haven't been coming in. So again, it's kind of useful. There's no way to clear these logs. If you want to see the full log, that'll obviously bring across everything. But that can be ignored if everything's green up here and you're not too worried. The final tab along the top here is ImageManager. So obviously this will list each of my customers' image managers, will tell me which site they're assigned to. If I click on one, it will then show me all of the managed folders, the storage in use, the images, verification, consolidation, retention, when the last replication or head start restore job have been running. So I get fantastic information here on exactly what's happening. I can click on individual machines to drill down a bit more with an ImageManager to see the size of the backups coming through, that the verifying is okay, etc. So this is important. It's good to know here. If verification was failing, it could mean that those backups have been hit by ransomware or they're now corrupt and I need to fix them. So we really need to know that information. The same thing with replication jobs. If it's queuing up and not getting files off site, I need to know about that. So that's all controlled under the spanner. It's called status rules. The status rule, there's a default one that gets applied to every machine, will determine at which point something goes, yellow or red on the dashboard. So I've got here, as long as I've got a good backup job within an hour, if one fails but the next one's okay, then don't alert me. If it exceeds an hour, then I want a critical. That means, we've had jobs failing. I can say, look, if I get 3 in a row, I might say only alert me after every 5 hours, but if 3 in a row fail out of 5 or something, then alert me because it's been a long failure issue. I want to know if hasn't been a good VSS backup. That's a problem. If someone's left a backup job paused, this is a big one, and I've seen some big problems here where a technician has paused a job because the job's now not failing. Their RMM or the emails aren't picking up that there's a failure because the job's basically disabled. So we need to know if someone's paused a job because that means it's not being backed up. Disk usage, unmanaged if you forgot to add it into ImageManager. If there's a destination conflict, so obviously ShadowProtect needs to back up, each machine needs to back up to its own folder. So this will alert you if someone's made a mistake there. If you're licensing is about to expire. If the ShadowProtect service isn't responsive. So this is really configurable. You could have different SLAs for different customers as well. And then ImageManager, verification, consolidation, retention, replication status, replication queue limit. This is a really important one. I mean, if we're backing up or replicating to StorageCraft Cloud or SoftSol SOS, I want to know that my backups are getting off site so we can monitor the queue size, and if it gets too big, it can generate an alert. So, there's heaps of useful stuff here that gives you instant visibility. The organizations allows you to separate out each customer. The policies can be applied to an organization. So these are the backup job policy that will apply to that customer. And then we can have primary and secondary contact. So primary contact might be an engineer responsible for that site that's going to get a report or gets emailed alerts. Secondary contact might be the end user that you configure with just a monthly report, for example. So that's where you configure it per site. We've obviously got user accounts and roles, are people that can log into ShadowControl. But from a reporting perspective down the bottom here for reports, basically if I view the appliance report, so as an admin, we kind of get like the dashboard summary along the top. We then get the ShadowProtect report down here, which gives us information on the backup jobs that are happening, the last backup size, and the current status. So obviously these are offline, so they're gray. The license is good. This one here is red because it's been paused. So it's indicating a problem. It's telling me when the last backup was. So that's it. One section here is the ShadowProtect endpoint details. You can turn that on or off. You've then got the ImageManager details. So I've got one machine here for a customer running ImageManager. It's not running any jobs. It's not managing any folders, but the license is active. These ones up here are showing me I've got some exceeding inactivity because the backups aren't running. So I get good visibility across different machines here on exactly what's happening. And then the third section you can turn on or off is the storage stats. So if I scroll down, here's a relevant one here for a machine. It's telling us average daily storage consumption, additional storage forecast based on recent usage. So I can see a trend here based on historical usage, and it's predicting over the next 12 months I'm going to need an extra terabyte. Now what will generally happen is you'll get this curve like this until your ImageManager hits retention, then it should start to level off as there's not continued growth in the size of the chain. So that's a report that can be scheduled. And again, this is where you choose which sections you want in the report. And then the organization level report, you can say, look, just send it daily, weekly, or monthly. So very configurable. We've also got a really cool high level report. And this is kind of, if someone says to me, Carl, how can I sleep at night knowing that all of my customers are being backed up? And sorry, I've gone all over the show here. So back under reports, I've got a section here called ShadowProtect Backups. So this is a high level across all of my sites or all of my customers. And it's filtered, each blue line is a different site or a different customer. And then it's telling me all of the machines based on total success. It's giving me a percentage of successful backups. So I can see the server does 47 backups a day, it's 100%, right? If I look down at my Exchange server, sometimes the backups fail on my Exchange server, when I'm rolling out updates or taking it offline. So I can see here, look, it was only 98% successful on this day, 95% successful, but it's still green. I said, look, as long as it's above 85, stay green. Once it gets below 65, below 85 will go orange, below 65 would go red. So it's configurable. We can choose how many days to monitor that over. But this is giving you very high level visibility, not just on the most recent status, it's looking at the total success across the board. This server here doesn't back up in weekends, so I've got the gaps here. This server's been paused, so I can see it's not been backed up at all. And then I've got some major issues down here with these machines that are offline. So this is a really great report to get visibility across everything. If I go back to reporting, the final one here is just a licensing report, so I can see across all of their machines what the ShadowProtect license keys are, and that's quite handy. So now backing up to appliance settings, this just allows you to configure the setup for the appliance. You can configure a backup so the appliance can export a data file. That's really good to do. Branding is where you can import your own company logo so that your customers are getting your branding. And ITSM notifications. So when you enable this, based on breaching a status rule, it can send an alert to your help desk with configurable information in here so you know exactly what's happened and so that you can respond to it. And furthermore, on the dashboard, we've got an easy link to the endpoint installation instructions down the bottom right. This will tell you what the install command is for a silent install of ShadowControl. And then here's the activation, that second part that we talked about. So obviously the user guide had the extra parameters, the -o, etc. And here's the link to download that MSI. So you can direct that download to come from ShadowControl via your RMM. And then here's the scripting to deploy that out very quickly. Or again, you just download it and install you can just double click the installer and run it manually. And then you just run this command to subscribe it to your ShadowControl appliance. So very easy. A couple of other very quick things. I know we're running out of time here. We've got the license pool. This gives us information on any perpetual keys of available activations. The push install. The managed endpoints will automatically show every machine that's already been activated to ShadowControl. So from this point, I could do a push install or update of ShadowProtect or ImageManager. So if I go ShadowProtect update to 6.7, if I go select all, it's found all of these machines. We've actually just released a newer version, 6.7.4, so I can actually go and push out that version to all of these machines. You can see it's going to go from 6.7.2 to 6.7.4. So very easy. It gives us information on that. There's one scheduled here to upgrade when this machine comes online. I can clear those logs once they've done. Additionally, with obviously ShadowProtect and ImageManager, the machine needs to reboot. So we won't do that automatically, but we do pop up a button here which you can click reboot, or obviously you would schedule that with your RMM tool to do after hours. So that's really handy. And then the final options up here is around the backup stores and policies. So again, this is for large scale deployment of a backup job. You can create a policy in ShadowControl. As you know, it's basically a policy is just a backup job that I can say I want a continuous job, 7 days a week, all day, every 15 minutes. We can even stagger that 15-minute backup so that every machine doesn't back up at the same time. And once you create that policy, you can assign it to endpoints via the organizations. You know, say this group of computers here. If I edit that, as I showed you before, I could apply that backup policy to that, and it will automatically apply the job to all of those machines. So really cool. I won't elaborate on that too much further. There's a bunch of YouTubes on this channel here that talk about ShadowControl. So if we just scroll down, ShadowControl version 3.8 demo. So that takes you through the policies and that kind of stuff, although we are up to version 4 now. Just actually, the last thing I'll show you quickly is not this, the downloads page. So if you go to StorageCraft.com, hover over support, there's a section here called software downloads and updates. In here, there's a section on ShadowControl. So as I mentioned, there's two parts to ShadowControl, and you want to get version 4. There's no real need for the previous version now. Basically, version 3.8 supported Windows XP in 2003, which gets dropped in version 4. However, you can install a version 4 appliance, and the appliance has a link to download. Sorry, where are we? If I just go back to the endpoint page. The appliance now includes a link for legacy Shadow XP or 2003 machines. You install the 3.8 agent from here, and it will still talk to a version 4 appliance. So that's a little bit more streamlined than it was previously. So yeah, so basically you've got the ISO installer to install the appliance, and then the endpoint agent can be downloaded from here, or you can just download it straight from the appliance as I showed you. So guys, I've kind of rushed through that demo quite quickly, but hopefully it's given you a little bit of an insight into the key benefits of ShadowControl. If you've got any questions, we've now had our time, but I can spend a little bit longer answering any questions or showing you anything further I may have missed. So please, I'll give you a couple of minutes, use the questions field in the webinar, and I'm happy to answer anything or show you anything I may have missed. Matt, just while we're waiting to hear back from people, was there anything you think I've missed or I could add in there on this webinar?
No, that was absolutely fantastic. Thanks, Carl.
Cool, thanks, Matt. All right, well, we'll just give the attendees another sort of minute or two, but basically that does bring us to the end of the webinar. So if anyone needs any help, just feel free to reach out to Matt or myself, and we can sort of take you through that. All right, and that handout is there, the download the PDF for the data sheet, which was off the website. And I think we'll wrap up. I haven't got any questions come through. So again, everyone, thank you for spending time today. The webinar will be emailed out to your recording so that you can go back and review any part of that at any time. Thanks again. Thanks, Matt.
Awesome. Thanks, Carl.